The emergency klaxons screamed through the depths of monitoring station Theta 9, their wailing cry cutting through the usual quiet hum of deep space observation equipment. Junior technician Lixara's secondary eyes snapped wide as her primary pair focused on the impossible readings flooding her console. Supervisor. Her voice cracked across the command frequency. I have gravitic distortions in Sector 9 Black. The void reach is showing activity. The response came back with the sharp certainty of someone who had worked this station for 20 cycles. Check your instruments, technician. The void reach doesn't show activity. Nothing comes out of the void reach. Lixara's claws danced across the holographic controls, running every diagnostic protocol she knew. The readings remained unchanged. If anything, they grew stronger. Supervisor. All diagnostics confirm accuracy. Something is coming through. Something big. The communications channel went silent for 3 heartbeats. Then the supervisor's voice returned, stripped of its earlier confidence. Send the readings to Imperial Command. Priority Alpha. Then, sound the station-wide alert. Lixara executed the commands with trembling hands. She had studied the void reach in her academy training like every monitoring officer in the Ascendancy Empire. It was a cautionary tale. A reminder of why the approved hyperspace routes existed. The void reach was a dead zone, where the fabric of space folded in on itself with such complexity that no navigation computer could plot a safe course. 17 expeditions across 4 centuries had entered those twisted dimensions. None had ever emerged. Until now. High Coordinator Velnath received the alert while reviewing trade negotiations with the Palaxian sector. The message materialized in red holographic text above his desk, and the color alone made his breathing sacs contract. Priority Alpha alerts were reserved for threats to the Ascendancy itself. He had received exactly 3 in his 30-year career. His fingers moved through the authentication sequences, and the full sensor data bloomed before him. Velnath felt his pulse quicken as he absorbed the information. A massive gravitic signature, consistent with a capital-class warship, was tearing its way out of hyperspace in the worst possible location deep inside Ascendancy core territory, emerging from a route that every civilized species agreed was certain death. Convene the Emergency Council, he commanded his aide. The council chamber filled rapidly. Representatives arriving from various departments with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. Admiral Crescestal of the Second Fleet arrived in full ceremonial armor, her tactical officers flanking her with expressions of controlled tension. Navigation Officer Ryshal entered last, his collection of mathematical instruments clinking softly at his belt. Velnath didn't waste time with formalities. 6 minutes ago, monitoring station Theta 9 detected an emergent signature in the void reach. The object is large enough to be a Dreadnought-class vessel, and will fully transition to normal space in approximately 14 minutes. Rishal, tell me this is a sensor malfunction. The navigation officer's face was pale as he studied the data on his personal display. High Coordinator, I cannot. The readings are consistent with a successful hyperspace emergence. But that should be impossible. The void reach has gravitational shear forces that would tear apart any ship's superstructure before. I don't need a lecture on why it's impossible, Velnath interrupted. I need to know who is doing the impossible and arriving in our space. Admiral Crescestal leaned forward. Could this be a new weapon? Some form of gravitic bomb, designed to destabilize our monitoring networks? Negative. Rishal's voice was steady despite his obvious distress. The signature is too regular, too controlled. This is a ship under power, not a detonation or spatial anomaly. The holographic display at the center of the chamber updated suddenly, and everyone fell silent. The massive form of a warship materialized in the tactical view, its hull scarred and broken in dozens of places. Atmosphere vented from 3 major breaches along its port side, forming glittering clouds of frozen gas. Shield generators flickered weakly across its surface, barely maintaining coherence, but the ship's main engines burned steadily, and its weapons arrays, though damaged, were still tracking potential threats. Identification complete. one of the tactical officers announced. UNSS Indomitable. Registry confirms it as a human dreadnought. Combat classification: heavy assault capital ship. Current status: critically damaged, but operational. The word human sent a ripple through the council chamber. Velnath felt his breathing sacs constrict further. The humans were a relatively young species to the galactic community, having achieved hyperspace travel only 2 centuries ago. They had proven themselves competent enough, establishing a modest alliance of worlds along the galactic rim. But they were contained, their expansion limited by the approved hyperspace routes that connected their territory to the wider galaxy. Those routes, carefully mapped by ascendancy cartographers over millennia, ensured that no species could threaten the established order. The humans had their place, as did everyone else, and the invisible walls of impossible hyperspace kept them there. Except a human ship had just crashed through one of those walls. How did they navigate the void reach? Velnath asked quietly. Raishal was working frantically at his instruments. I don't know, High Coordinator. I genuinely don't know. The mathematics required to plot a course through that region should be beyond any known computational system. The gravitational variables alone require solving equations with 17 nested dimensional factors. It's not that the route is difficult, it's that it should be fundamentally impossible to calculate. Admiral Crestal's voice carried the cold certainty of a career military officer. Then, they didn't calculate it. They got lucky. One ship in 10,000 might randomly stumble through such a route by pure chance. Do you believe that, Admiral? Velnath asked. The Admiral's silence was answer enough. Dispatch the 4th Battle Group to intercept and contain, Velnath ordered. Full quarantine protocols. Nothing gets in or out of that sector. And someone get me a communication channel to that ship. I want to know why a human dreadnought just appeared in our space through a route that doesn't exist. Aboard the UNSS Indomitable, Admiral Park Ji-hoon stood on a bridge lit by emergency lighting and covered in smoke from burned-out systems. His uniform was torn at the shoulder, where an exploding console had thrown him against a bulkhead 3 hours ago. Blood had dried along his temple from a cut he barely remembered receiving. Report, he said calmly. His first officer, Commander Sarah Chen, read from a battered tactical display. We're through, sir. Navigation confirms we're in Ascendancy Core territory, approximately 7 light-years from their capital system. Multiple warships converging on our position. Estimate contact in 40 minutes. Damage? Portside sections 12 through 19 are open to vacuum. We've lost primary shields, and the main reactor is running at 42% capacity. Weapons are functional, but ammunition stores are depleted by 60%. We're in no condition to fight our way out of this, Admiral. Park nodded slowly. He had known the odds when he gave the order to enter the void reach. Behind them, 3 Krellnax dreadnoughts had been closing in, their weapons tearing through his task force. The Indomitable had been the only ship fast enough to reach the hyperspace transition point. The rest of his squadron had given their lives to buy him those precious minutes. The Krellnax were another young species, ambitious and aggressive. They had been pushing against human territory for years, testing defenses, probing weaknesses. 3 weeks ago they had launched a full offensive, and the war that humanity had been dreading had finally begun. Park had been returning from a deep reconnaissance mission when the Krellnax fleet caught him. Running back to human space would have led the enemy straight to the colony worlds along the border. So, he had made a different choice. Lieutenant Kim, Park said, turning to his chief navigator. Lieutenant Kim Seo-yun looked up from her station, her face illuminated by the soft glow of mathematical equations scrolling across her screen. She was young, barely 30. But she possessed a mind that could see patterns in numbers, the way artists saw patterns in paint. It was her calculations that had brought them through the void reach, alive. Yes, Admiral. Prepare a data package containing your navigational calculations. Full proof. Complete methodology. If the Ascendancy destroys us, I want that information to survive. Kim's eyes widened. Sir, that data represents humanity's most significant breakthrough in hyperspace navigation in a century. If we give it to the Ascendancy, we may not have a choice, Lieutenant. But I don't intend to give it to them freely. Encrypt it with our highest level protocols and prepare it for transmission on my command only. Understood, sir. The communication console chimed. Admiral, we're being hailed on standard diplomatic frequencies. It's the Ascendancy High Coordinator himself. Park straightened his torn uniform as much as possible. On screen, the holographic display shimmered, and High Coordinator Velnath's face appeared. The alien's features were difficult for humans to read, but Park had spent enough time studying Ascendancy body language to recognize tension in the slight flaring of Velnath's nostril slits. Admiral Park Ji-hoon of the UNSS Indomitable, Velnath said formally. You are in violation of Ascendancy sovereign space. Explain your presence immediately. Park met the alien's gaze steadily. High Coordinator Velnath, we entered your space under emergency circumstances while fleeing hostile forces. We request temporary sanctuary while we complete repairs. You entered our space through the Void Reach, Velnath said, and now there was no mistaking the tension in his voice. A route that all established navigational charts mark as impassable. How did you accomplish this? Park allowed himself a slight smile. With mathematics, High Coordinator. Nothing more, nothing less. That's not possible. The gravitational variables are complex but solvable, Park interrupted. We calculated a safe route through your so-called impossible space. And in doing so, High Coordinator, we've learned something very interesting. We've learned that the Void Reach isn't impossible at all. It's just difficult, which makes us wonder what other impossible routes might actually be possible if someone takes the time to do the mathematics properly. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stars. Park watched Velnath's face carefully and saw the moment when understanding bloomed behind the alien's eyes. Understanding and fear. You will remain in position, Velnath said finally. Do not attempt to flee or transmit any data. We are dispatching ships to escort you to a secure facility where we can discuss this matter properly. The communication ended abruptly. Commander Chen turned to Park with concern clear on her face. Admiral, if they realize the full implications of what we've done, they already realize it, Park said quietly. The question is what they'll do about it. How long until we can jump again? Engineering estimates 6 hours minimum for hyperspace systems, sir. Possibly longer. Then we wait. And we watch. Lieutenant Kim, continue working on those calculations. If we need to run again, I want to be able to go somewhere even more impossible. Kim nodded, her fingers already moving across her console. Back in the council chamber, Velnath dismissed the other representatives and asked only Admiral Cressistal and Navigation Officer Rishal to remain. Speak freely, he said once they were alone. What have the humans done? Rishal placed his instruments on the table with shaking hands. If they truly calculated a route through the Void Reach, High Coordinator, then they possess computational capabilities far beyond what we believed possible for their species. But more than that, they've proven that the fundamental principle underlying our entire navigational monopoly is false. Explain. The Ascendancy's power rests on our control of hyperspace routes, Rishal said carefully. We maintain the only complete map of safe passages through the galaxy. Species wishing to expand must use our approved routes, which naturally limits where they can go and how fast they can grow. We've always claimed that the vast regions marked as impossible on our charts truly are impossible. But if the humans can calculate routes through the Void Reach, then every impossible region might actually be passable with the right mathematics, Velnath finished. Which means we've been lying for 3 centuries about the true nature of hyperspace navigation. Not lying, precisely, Admiral Cressistal interjected. The routes are genuinely dangerous. Many species lack the computational ability to. We deliberately never tried to find better routes, Velnath said flatly. We marked vast regions of space as forbidden not because they were truly impassable, but because keeping them forbidden maintained our control. And now the humans have proved it was all a lie. He turned to face the holographic display showing the damaged human ship surrounded by growing numbers of Ascendancy vessels. Such a small thing. That broken Dreadnought. But it carried in its computers the potential to shatter an empire. "What do we do, High Coordinator?" Rishal asked softly. Velnath was silent for a long moment, watching the distant scene. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision he was making. "We convene the Inner Council. All of it. Not just the Emergency Committee. Because what happens next will determine whether the Ascendancy survives the next decade, or whether that human ship just fired the opening shot in a revolution we can't possibly win." The Inner Council chamber existed in a section of the capital station that most Ascendancy citizens didn't know about. It had been built 347 years ago by the founders, those first 10 species who had united to create the Empire. The room's walls were inscribed with the founding principles, carved in a dozen different languages and scripts. High Coordinator Velnath had always found comfort in those walls, in the permanence they represented. Today they felt like the walls of a tomb. 23 council members sat around the curved table, representing the major power blocks within the Ascendancy. Some were military leaders, like Admiral Cressus Tal. Others held economic portfolios or governed entire sectors. All of them possessed security clearances high enough to know the truth about the Ascendancy's foundation. All of them knew about the lie. "The human ship remains in containment," Velnath began without preamble. "Our 4th battle group has established a perimeter. 6 dreadnoughts, 20 cruisers, and supporting craft. Enough firepower to vaporize the Indomitable and everything aboard her in approximately 40 seconds. "Then do so," snapped Councillor Drexval, his scales flushing with agitation. "The humans have violated our space and discovered information that threatens the stability of the Empire. Eliminate them before this situation escalates. And when humanity demands answers about why we destroyed one of their capital ships," Velnath countered, "they know where the Indomitable went. When she doesn't return, they'll send more ships. Ships that now know routes we claimed were impossible." Junior Councillor Treshkan leaned forward. She was young for her position, representing the newly incorporated Calexian systems. With respect to Councillor Drexval, destroying the ship treats the symptom while ignoring the disease. "The humans have proved our navigational monopoly is built on false premises. Killing this one crew doesn't eliminate that knowledge. It buys us time," Drexval argued. "Time to secure our borders. Time to revise our strategic position. Time to dig the grave deeper." Treshkan's voice carried an edge that made several older councillors turn to look at her. "I was educated in Ascendancy schools, taught Ascendancy history. I believed the story we tell everyone. The founders mapped the safe routes through trial and error, losing countless ships until they established the passages we use today. The forbidden zones were marked to protect future generations from the same losses. That's what we teach our children. But it's not true, is it?" Silence filled the chamber. Velnath felt the weight of 3 centuries pressing down on him. He had learned the truth when he ascended to High Coordinator, as all in the highest positions eventually did. The knowledge had given him nightmares for months. Navigation Officer Rishal stood, his instruments spread before him on the table. "Councillor Treshkan is correct. I have spent the past 4 hours analyzing the sensor data from the human ship's emergence. Their navigation was precise. Not lucky. Not accidental. Precise. They plotted a course through gravitational chaos that our best computers claim is impossible to calculate. But they did calculate it, which means our computers are using flawed models, or we've been deliberately limiting our own navigational research." "Both," Velnath said quietly. "The answer is both." He gestured, and the chamber's holographic system activated. Charts filled the air above the table, showing the galaxy's approved hyperspace routes in blue and the forbidden zones in red. The red zones covered nearly 70% of the mapped galaxy. "The founders did lose ships establishing our initial routes," Velnath explained. "That part of the history is true, but once they had secured their own positions, Once they had claimed the richest systems and established their power, they stopped exploring. They declared the remaining regions impassable and forbade further research into advanced navigation techniques. Any scientist who tried to develop better computational models for hyperspace travel found their funding cut or their results classified. Why? Treshkan demanded. Why deliberately limit our own advancement? Why? 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 Control, Admiral Cressistal answered, her voice heavy. The approved routes determine everything: which systems can be reached, which species can expand, where trade flows, where military fleets can patrol. By controlling the map, the founders controlled the entire ascendancy, and their descendants, our current ruling families, have maintained that control ever since. Another counselor, elderly Mortox, spoke up. You make it sound sinister, Admiral. But consider the alternative. If every species had access to unlimited hyperspace navigation, the chaos would be unmanageable. Young, aggressive species, like the Krelnax, would expand, unchecked. We'd have constant wars over disputed territories. The ascendancy brought order to the galaxy. We brought a gilded cage, Treshkan shot back. We told everyone it was for their own good, but really, it was for ours. And now the humans have broken the bars. One ship, Drexval insisted. One damaged ship that we currently have surrounded. We can still contain this. Can we? Velnoth pulled up the communication records. Before we could establish jamming, the Indomitable transmitted a standard diplomatic message on open channels. Every monitoring station within 10 light-years received it. The content was innocuous, but the source point wasn't. Every astrogation officer in range knows that a ship emerged from the Void Reach. Questions are already being asked. Rishal nodded grimly. I've received 7 inquiries from navigation departments across the Empire. They want to know if our charts are wrong about the Void Reach. They want to know what other routes might be possible. Tell them it was a fluke, Drexval said. One lucky accident doesn't invalidate centuries of data. That might have worked, Velnoth said, until 10 minutes ago. He gestured again, and a new communication filled the display. This is a priority message from Admiral Park Ji-hoon, commander of the Indomitable. He's offering to surrender peacefully and submit to internment. In exchange, he wants assurance that his crew will be treated according to standard prisoner of war protocols. He also wants us to know that humanity's government is aware of his ship's route and destination. If the Indomitable is destroyed, her loss will not be a mystery. He's bluffing, Drexval said immediately. Perhaps. But can we afford to find out? Velnoth turned to face the council directly. Here is our situation. The humans have proved that our forbidden zones are navigable. If we destroy them, we confirm that we have something to hide and likely provoke a war with humanity. If we capture them and seize their data, we might keep the secret contained for a while longer, but we've already seen how questions spread. And if we do nothing, if we simply let them go, we acknowledge that our entire navigational framework is suspect. There is a fourth option, Treshkan said carefully. We could tell the truth. The explosion of voices nearly drowned her out. Counselors shouted over each other. Some in anger, some in fear. Velnoth let it continue for 30 seconds, before raising his hand for silence. Explain your reasoning, counselor. Treshkan stood, her posture straight despite the hostile stares from some of the older council members. The secret is already compromised. We can spend resources trying to contain it, but information like this doesn't stay buried. The humans will share their navigational breakthrough with their allies. Those allies will begin exploring routes we claimed were impossible. Within a generation, maybe sooner, the truth will be common knowledge. We can either wait for that to happen while looking increasingly desperate and deceptive, or we can acknowledge the reality now, on our terms. And admit that we've been lying for 3 centuries? Mortax asked. The political damage would be catastrophic. Vassal species would demand access to previously forbidden territories, Trade agreements based on controlled routes would collapse. The entire economic structure of the empire would be thrown into chaos. Yes, Treshkin agreed. It would be painful. But we would survive it if we act with integrity. We could open research into advanced navigation, offer to help other species develop their own capabilities. We could transform the ascendancy from an empire that rules through control to one that leads through cooperation. Idealistic nonsense, Drexval muttered. Is it? Admiral Crestal surprised everyone by speaking in Treshkan's favor. I've spent my career maintaining the military dominance that keeps the ascendancy secure, but I'm also old enough to remember when we incorporated the Calexian systems. We promised them partnership, but delivered subjugation. We told them they could settle new worlds, but only along routes we approved. We've done this to dozens of species. How many of them would stand with us if a real crisis emerged? How many see us as protectors versus prison guards? Velnath felt a cold certainty settling in his chest. The truth he had been avoiding for the past 6 hours could no longer be denied. Rishal, your honest assessment. If we don't control the narrative, what happens? The navigation officer closed his eyes briefly. Revolution, High Coordinator. Once species realize they've been deliberately restricted, once they understand that the galaxy is much larger and more accessible than we claimed, there will be uprisings. The restricted colonies will rebel. Vassal species will demand independence. Our trade monopolies will crumble. And we'll have no moral authority to hold it together because we'll have been exposed as liars. And if we do tell the truth voluntarily, we might channel that anger into something productive. We'll still face challenges, but we'll be seen as reformers rather than desperate tyrants clinging to power. Velnath looked around the table at the faces of his fellow counselors. He saw fear there, and anger, and calculation. But in Treshkan's face and Admiral Cresistal's expression, he saw something else. Determination. Perhaps even hope. Before he could speak, another alert sounded. His aide's voice came through on his personal comm. High Coordinator. Urgent report from the containment force. Multiple ships are entering the system through unauthorized hyperspace routes. What ships? Velnath demanded. Unknown configuration, sir. But they're broadcasting identification codes from restricted species. The Veltorn Collective. The Arxian Assembly. The New Pelax Cooperative. All the major vassal groups. They're all coming through routes we classified as impassable. The chamber erupted in chaos again. This time Velnath couldn't calm it with a gesture. He watched the tactical display as dozens of ships materialized throughout the system, each one emerging from a supposedly impossible route. Some appeared near the Indomitable. Others took up positions around key orbital facilities. Then his communications console lit up with an incoming message on the same frequency the humans had used. The signal was encrypted, but the protocol was standard diplomatic format. Velnath accepted it, and a face he recognized appeared on the screen. Ambassador Tynrex of the Veltorn Collective, technically a subordinate species within the Ascendancy, but Velnath had always sensed intelligence and resentment beneath the ambassador's polite compliance. High Coordinator Velnath, Tynrex said formally. I am transmitting from a vessel currently positioned approximately 100,000 kilometers from your command station. As you can see, we have successfully navigated through what your charts call the Serpent's Coil, a region you have long claimed is impossible to traverse. This was accomplished using navigational algorithms we have been developing in secret for the past 40 years. Velnath felt his breathing sacs constrict to almost nothing. Ambassador, what is the meaning of this incursion? Not an incursion, High Coordinator. A demonstration. For decades, we suspected that the navigational restrictions placed on vassal species were more political than practical. The arrival of the human ship through the Void Reach confirmed our suspicions. We wanted you to know that we are not powerless. We are not trapped in the territories you assigned us. We have simply been waiting for the right moment to prove it. This could be considered an act of war, only if you choose to treat it as such. Tynrex's expression was difficult to read, But Velnath thought he detected something like sad determination. We do not seek violence, High Coordinator. We seek honesty. We seek the freedom that was promised when our species joined the Ascendancy, but never truly delivered. We are here today to tell you that the old system cannot continue. The galaxy is changing. You can change with it, or you can be swept aside by it. The communication ended, leaving Velnath staring at the empty screen. Behind him, the council had finally fallen silent. They had all heard Tinarex's message. They had all seen the tactical display showing how many ships had suddenly appeared in their most secure system. Admiral Crescistal spoke quietly. Permission to advise, High Coordinator? Granted. Don't order my fleet to open fire. This situation can still be resolved peacefully, but only if we don't do something irreversible in the next few minutes. Velnath turned back to face the council. Mortax looked stricken. Drex Val's scales had gone pale. But Tresh Khan's expression was fierce with vindication. It seems, Velnath said slowly, that the choice has been made for us. The question is no longer whether to preserve the old system. The question is whether we lead the transition to the new one, or whether we're dragged into it as prisoners. This is disaster, Mortax whispered. No, Treshkin said firmly. This is opportunity. We made mistakes. We built our empire on sand and called it stone. Now the tide is coming in, and we can either drown in denial or learn to swim. Velnath felt exhausted suddenly, as though he had aged a decade in a single day. But beneath the exhaustion was something he hadn't expected. Relief, the lie he had been forced to maintain. The secret that had poisoned his administration from its first day was finally in the open. Admiral Crescistal, stand down all weapons, he ordered. Navigation Officer Rishal, prepare to transmit our complete navigational database to the council chamber. Not the public version. The real one, including all the classified research showing which forbidden zones are actually navigable. And someone get me a direct line to Admiral Park Ji-hoon. If we're going to rebuild this empire on truth instead of lies, we might as well start by talking to the human who broke everything. As the orders were carried out, Velnath allowed himself one moment to look at the walls of the chamber with their carved promises and principles. The founders had built something impressive once. Perhaps their descendants could build something better. Or perhaps, he thought as another alert showed more ships arriving through impossible routes, they would build nothing at all, and the galaxy would find its own way forward without them. Either way, the old ascendancy died the moment a human dreadnought came tearing through the void reach. What came next would be up to everyone who had been held back by the lie they had all accepted for so long. The age of controlled routes was ending. The age of open navigation had begun. Lieutenant Kim Seo-yeon didn't look up from her console as Admiral Park entered the navigation bay. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, mathematical equations streaming past faster than most people could read. Numbers had always made more sense to her than words. They didn't lie, didn't hide, didn't pretend to be something they weren't. Show me, Park said simply. Kim gestured, and the main display filled with what looked like chaos. Gravitational field lines, twisted through three-dimensional space, in patterns that seemed random. But she had learned to see the order beneath the chaos, the hidden pathways that existed between the crushing forces. This is the void reach, as the ascendancy charts show it, she explained. According to their models, the gravitational shear forces exceed survivable limits by a factor of 10. No ship should be able to traverse this space, but their models are wrong. How wrong? They're using approximations that work fine for normal space, but break down in regions of extreme gravitational complexity. It's like trying to predict turbulent water flow, using equations meant for still ponds. The math looks sophisticated, but it's fundamentally the wrong approach. Park studied the display with the careful attention of someone who had learned to trust his navigator completely. And you found the right approach? I borrowed it from Earth oceanography, actually. Kim pulled up a new set of equations. There's a type of mathematical analysis used to predict rogue waves. It tracks how multiple wave patterns interact and amplify each other. I adapted that framework for gravitational fields. Once you do that, once you stop trying to smooth out the complexity and instead embrace it, patterns emerge. Safe routes exist. Admiral. They're narrow and they shift over time, but they're there. And this is what you're preparing to transmit? Kim nodded. The full methodology, complete proofs, worked examples. Anyone with a decent quantum computer and basic calculus training could replicate my results. Within 6 months, maybe less, this will be standard navigation throughout the galaxy. If we survive the next 6 hours, Park observed. Yes, sir. If we survive. They were interrupted by Commander Chen's voice over the ship-wide comm. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from High Coordinator Velnath. He's requesting direct communication with you and Lieutenant Kim. Park and Kim exchanged glances. Both of us? He specifically asked for your chief navigator, sir. Park made a decision. Route it to the navigation bay. Let's see what the High Coordinator wants. The holographic display shifted, and Velnath's face appeared. The alien looked tired, Kim thought. Not just physically exhausted, but worn down in some deeper way. She had seen that same expression on her professor's face when he had discovered a fundamental error in decades of his own research. Admiral Park, Lieutenant Kim Seo-yeon. Velnath's voice was formal, but lacked the cold hostility from their first communication. I am contacting you to propose a discussion regarding your navigational breakthrough and its implications for the ascendancy. You mean you want to know if we'll agree to keep quiet about your lie? Park said bluntly. To Kim's surprise, Velnath didn't deny it. No, Admiral. That ship has sailed, as you humans say. In the past hour, 17 different vassal species have demonstrated their own ability to navigate supposedly impossible routes. Our navigational monopoly is already broken. What I want to know is whether you'll help us manage the chaos that's coming. Park leaned back against the console. That's an unexpected request, High Coordinator. Last I checked, you had 6 dreadnoughts surrounding my position with weapons charged. Those weapons are now powered down, Admiral. We're facing a fundamental restructuring of galactic politics, and it will happen whether we want it or not. The question is whether it happens violently or peacefully. I'm hoping you might prefer the peaceful option. Kim found herself speaking before she quite realized she intended to. Why ask us? You could just take our data. You have the firepower. 2. Velnath's attention shifted to her, and she felt the weight of his gaze even through the holographic connection. Lieutenant, I suspect you understand something that many in my government have forgotten. Knowledge taken by force is poisoned. If we steal your research, we become the enemies of progress. If we cooperate with you, we might salvage some credibility from this disaster. You're asking for our help covering up your crimes, Park said flatly. No, Admiral. I'm asking for your help ensuring that the revelation of those crimes doesn't lead to a galactic war. Velnath gestured, and new images appeared alongside his face. Tactical displays showing ship movements throughout Ascendancy space. In the past 70 minutes, restricted species have launched 347 vessels through previously forbidden routes. Most are civilian exploration ships or commercial freighters, but 16 are military vessels from species that have spent decades nursing grievances against the Ascendancy. We have reports of territorial disputes erupting in 4 sectors. 2 minor conflicts have already turned violent. Kim felt her stomach tighten as she studied the displays. The numbers were increasing, even as she watched. Ships appearing throughout the galaxy, emerging from routes that had been closed for centuries. The careful order of the Ascendancy's controlled expansion was coming apart in real time. This is what happens when you build an empire on lies, Park said. But his tone had shifted from accusatory to analytical. People don't just want freedom, High Coordinator. They want revenge. I know. And some of that revenge is justified. Velnath's expression, showed something that might have been shame. But innocent people will die if this escalates. Colonies that had nothing to do with our deception will be caught in the fighting. Lieutenant Kim, your navigational breakthrough is brilliant. But it's also a match thrown into a warehouse full of explosives. Will you help us contain the fire? Kim looked at Admiral Park. He gave her a slight nod, leaving the decision to her. She thought about the equations filling her console, the elegant mathematics that had revealed the hidden pathways. She had been so focused on solving the problem that she hadn't fully considered the consequences of the solution. What exactly are you proposing, High Coordinator? She asked. A conference. Representatives from humanity, the Ascendancy leadership, and the vassal species that have demonstrated navigational capability. We meet on neutral ground and establish new rules for a galaxy where hyperspace navigation is no longer controlled by a single power. You share your methodology freely. We acknowledge our historical deceptions, and together, we create a framework that prevents this situation from collapsing into warfare. You want us to legitimize your government's authority even after you've been exposed as liars? Park's skepticism was evident. I want you to help us create something better than what existed before, Velnath countered. The Ascendancy served a purpose once, Admiral. It brought hundreds of species together under common laws. Yes, we maintained power through deception, but we also prevented conflicts, facilitated trade, and created the infrastructure that connected the galaxy. That infrastructure is about to collapse. We need to replace it with something before the chaos becomes permanent. Kim found herself nodding slowly. He's right, Admiral. Look at these trajectories. She pulled up her own analysis of the ship movements. Without coordination, we're going to see collisions within the next few days. Multiple ships trying to claim the same newly accessible systems. Trade routes disrupted because no one knows who has authority to regulate traffic. It's not just political chaos. It's going to be physical disasters. Park was silent for a long moment, studying the displays. Finally, he spoke. I need to consult with my government, High Coordinator. I don't have authority to commit humanity to a galactic conference without approval. I understand. But I should tell you that I've already reached out to your government through diplomatic channels. They're reviewing the proposal now. I contacted you first because you're here, and because Lieutenant Kim's work is at the center of all this. If she's willing to share her methodology as part of a peaceful transition, it will make the entire negotiation easier. Kim felt everyone's attention shift to her. It was uncomfortable, being at the center of something so enormous. She was a mathematician, not a politician. She solved equations, not diplomatic crises, but she thought about the ships on the displays, thousands of people traveling through routes that had been forbidden to them for their entire lives. She thought about the Ascendancy's lie, maintained for centuries because those in power found it convenient. And she thought about the alternative, the violence and chaos that could erupt if this transition wasn't managed carefully. I'll share everything, she said. Complete methodology. All my research. Every equation and proof. I'll even help train other navigators if needed. But I have two conditions. Name them, Velnath said immediately. First, the information goes to everyone. Not just the major powers. Not just the species you consider important. Every species in the galaxy gets access to the same data at the same time. No tiers, no restricted access, no gradual release, complete openness or nothing. Agreed. And your second condition? The Ascendancy has to publish its real navigational database. Not just going forward, but historically. I want everyone to see exactly which routes you knew were passable and deliberately marked as forbidden. I want a full accounting of the lie so that it can never be told again. The silence stretched long enough that Kim wondered if she had overreached. But then, Velnath nodded slowly. That will be politically difficult. Some members of our leadership will resign rather than accept that level of transparency. But yes, Lieutenant, I agree to your conditions. Full disclosure, Complete openness. We've spent 3 centuries maintaining a secret. Perhaps it's time we tried maintaining the truth instead. Commander Chen's voice interrupted from the comm system. Admiral, I'm receiving priority communications from Earth. The President wants to speak with you directly. Park straightened. I need to take this, High Coordinator. But it seems we have the basis for a discussion. One more thing, Admiral, before you go. Velnath's expression became even more serious. There's a complication I need you to be aware of. Not all elements of the Ascendancy government support the approach I'm taking. The Black Fleet, our Special Operations Force, has been activated by hardline council members who see this situation differently. They believe the old order can still be preserved through force. How many ships? Park asked sharply. 23 capital vessels, plus support craft. They're commanded by Fleet Commander Zaxatul, a veteran who believes deeply in the Ascendancy's original mission. He has orders to eliminate the Indomitable and suppress any vassal species ships that refuse to stand down. My own forces are moving to intercept. But there's going to be a confrontation. Kim felt ice form in her stomach. You're saying we're about to be attacked by your own military? I'm saying that the Ascendancy is fracturing. Some of us want to adapt to the new reality. Others want to destroy anything that threatens the old order. Your ship represents everything they fear, Lieutenant. I've ordered ships to protect you, but you should prepare for combat. The communication ended, leaving Park and Kim staring at each other in the sudden quiet of the navigation bay. Well, Park said with dark humor, I suppose that's one way to encourage cooperation. Nothing builds trust like being caught between two sides of someone else's civil war. Kim turned back to her console, her fingers moving automatically to bring up defensive calculations. Admiral, if the Black Fleet is coming, we need to finish repairs on our jump systems. With the navigational data I've compiled, I can plot us routes that would take months for anyone using standard calculations to follow. How long do you need? Engineering says 4 hours minimum. But Admiral, there's something else. She pulled up a new display, showing hyperspace routes throughout the region. If we run, if we hide, we leave everyone else to fight this out without the evidence that started it all. The Black Fleet won't stop with us. They'll go after the vassal species ships, try to make examples of anyone who challenged Ascendancy authority. Park nodded slowly. You're saying we need to stay and fight. I'm saying we need to stay and prove that the old way of doing things can't work anymore. If the Black Fleet destroys us, the hardliners win. They'll claim it was all a misunderstanding, suppress the navigational data, and try to reimpose the old restrictions. But if we survive, if we stand here alongside the vassal species and show that the Ascendancy can't simply blast its way back to the status quo, then maybe the peaceful transition has a chance. That's very optimistic thinking, Lieutenant, considering our shields are at 40% and we're low on ammunition. Kim smiled despite the tension. I'm a mathematician, sir. I deal in probabilities. Our odds aren't great, but they're better than zero. And sometimes that's all you need to solve an impossible problem. Park looked at her for a long moment, then turned to the comm system. Commander Chen, delay that jump system priority. Redirect resources to shields and weapons. We're staying put. Sir? Chen's confusion was evident. We came through the impossible to get here, Commander. Might as well finish the job properly. And get me a channel to the vassal species, ships in the system. If we're going to prove the old empire can't survive through force alone, we're going to need allies. As Park issued orders, Kim returned to her calculations. The equations scrolling across her screen showed more than just hyperspace routes now. They showed probability curves, combat trajectories, strategic positions, the mathematics of revolution, she thought. Not what she had expected to be calculating when she started this research. But then again, she had never expected her navigation equations to break an empire. Sometimes the most important mathematical proofs were the ones that proved the impossible was actually possible all along. Outside the Indomitable, more ships were arriving. Some were Ascendancy vessels loyal to Velnath. Others belonged to the vassal species that had been waiting for this moment. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, the Black Fleet was coming, carrying orders to preserve an empire that had already begun to crumble. Kim pulled up her navigational database and began preparing it for mass transmission. If they were going to stand and fight, she wanted to make sure that even if they lost, her research would survive. The truth about the roots, the mathematics that proved the galaxy was bigger and more accessible than anyone had been told, would spread regardless of what happened in the next few hours. She thought about something her professor had told her once. The beautiful thing about mathematical truth, he had said, is that it doesn't need anyone's permission to be true. It just is. And eventually, no matter how many people try to ignore it or suppress it, reality has a way of proving the math correct. Reality, Kim thought as she watched the tactical displays fill with more and more ships, was about to conduct a very violent proof. She just hoped they would all survive to see the final equation balanced. Fleet Commander Zaxatul stood on the bridge of the Ascendancy warship Eternal Dominance and watched the tactical display with growing rage. 23 capital ships under his command, 200 years of military tradition behind him, and orders from the Inner Council hardliners to restore order by any means necessary. This should have been simple. A single damaged human ship, a handful of vassal species vessels playing at rebellion, and traitors like Velnath who had forgotten what the Ascendancy truly stood for. But the display showed something that made his battle planning infinitely more complicated. Nearly 40 ships had taken up defensive positions around the human Dreadnought, and more were arriving through previously forbidden routes every few minutes. Worse, 12 Ascendancy vessels under Admiral Cressis Tal's command had positioned themselves between the Black Fleet and the Indomitable. Ascendancy ships protecting humans and vassal species from other Ascendancy forces. The galaxy had gone mad. Status of our primary targets? Zaxatul demanded. His tactical officer responded crisply. The human ship, Indomitable, remains in position. Shields at 48%. And rising. They've completed repair on at least 2 weapons batteries. The vassal coalition ships are maintaining a defensive perimeter. Admiral Cressis Tal's forces are on high alert, but have not targeted us directly. Yet, Zaxatul said. They haven't targeted us yet. How long until we're in weapons range? 43 minutes at current speed, Commander. Zaxatul pulled up the communication records from the Inner Council. The orders were clear, signed by 7 of the most senior counselors. Eliminate the human ship. Suppress the vassal rebellion. Restore the navigational monopoly by force. Some on the council, like that idealistic fool Treshkan, might have been swayed by High Coordinator Velnath's weak arguments about peaceful transition. But others understood what was really at stake. The Ascendancy had brought order to chaos. It had taken hundreds of warring species and forged them into a functioning civilization. Yes, some deceptions had been necessary. But the alternative was the anarchic violence that humanity itself had only recently escaped in its own history. Open a channel to Admiral Cressis Tal, Zaxatul ordered. The display shifted, and the Admiral's face appeared. She looked older than Zaxatul remembered from their last meeting. Tired, but her expression remained sharp and alert. Fleet Commander, she said neutrally. I was wondering when you'd contact me. Admiral Cressis Tal, you are ordered to stand down your forces and allow the Black Fleet to execute its lawful orders from the Inner Council. Those orders lack legitimacy, Commander. High Coordinator Velnath has countermanded them and is pursuing a diplomatic solution. Velnath has been compromised by the enemy. The humans, and their vassal allies, are using his weakness to destroy everything we've built. Cressis Tal's expression hardened. I've served the Ascendancy for 47 years, Commander. I've fought its wars, defended its borders, and sacrificed more than you'll ever know to maintain our security. So when I tell you that we cannot bomb our way out of this crisis, I'm speaking from experience, not weakness. The navigational monopoly must be preserved. It cannot be preserved It's already gone. In the past 3 hours, 173 species have demonstrated the ability to navigate forbidden routes. You can destroy the human ship. You can even destroy all the vassal vessels currently in this system. But you cannot destroy the knowledge they've already spread. The galaxy knows the truth now, Commander. The only question is whether we adapt or die. Zaxatul felt his frustration rising. So, we simply surrender? Allow these upstart species to dictate terms to us? We negotiate. We acknowledge past mistakes and work to build something better. Or yes, if you force the issue, we end up in a civil war that will tear the ascendancy apart and leave every species in the galaxy vulnerable to the Krellnax and others who would happily fill the power vacuum. The human ship must be destroyed, Zaxatul insisted. It's the symbol of rebellion. Eliminate it, and the vassal species will remember their place. You're wrong. Destroy the indomitable, and you'll create martyrs. Every species that's felt oppressed by our policies will unite against us. We'll face not just a rebellion, but a coordinated revolution. The communication ended as Cressus Tal cut the connection. Zaxatul stared at the blank display for a moment before turning to his tactical officer. Prepare weapons. If Crestal won't move aside, we'll go through her forces. All ships are to target the human Dreadnought. Once it's destroyed, the vassal coalition will collapse. Aboard the Indomitable, alarms sounded as sensors detected the Black Fleet's weapons powering up. Admiral Park moved to the tactical station, where Commander Chen was coordinating with the vassal ships. The Black Fleet is going to engage, Chen reported. Admiral Crestal's forces are moving to intercept. But they're outnumbered, almost 2 to 1. Park studied the display, calculating angles and firing solutions with the practiced eye of someone who had survived 3 major fleet engagements. What about our allies? The vassal coalition has 41 ships in range, but most are light cruisers or converted freighters. They're brave, but they don't have the firepower to stand against Black Fleet dreadnoughts. Then we'll need to be clever instead of powerful. Park opened a channel to all allied ships. This is Admiral Park Ji-hoon of the UNSS Indomitable to all coalition forces. We're about to be engaged by hostile ascendancy vessels. I'm uploading tactical data now, including optimal defensive formations based on your ship capabilities. The Black Fleet expects us to fight like conventional forces. We're going to fight like we have nothing to lose. Because we don't. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her navigation console. Admiral, I'm detecting hyperspace distortions. Multiple new arrivals incoming. More Black Fleet ships? Negative, sir. The signatures don't match ascendancy patterns. Kim's fingers flew across her controls as she processed the data. Sir, I think these are human ships. Park felt hope surge in his chest. Confirm that, Lieutenant. Confirmed. It's the UNSS Dauntless and 3 escort frigates. They must have followed our navigational breadcrumbs through the void reach. The communications system crackled, and Captain Maria Rodriguez's voice filled the bridge. Admiral Park, good to see you're still in one piece. We got your data dump right before you jumped. Took us a while to calculate the route, but your lieutenant's mathematics are solid. Fleet Command sent us to back you up or bring you home. Looks like we're doing both. Park allowed himself a brief smile. Captain Rodriguez, your timing is impeccable. We've got approximately 30 minutes before hostile forces engage. I'm sending you tactical data now. Received and acknowledged. Sir, before we get busy, you should know that we're not the only ones who followed you. Check your sensors. Bearing 270. Kim pulled up the new sensor data and gasped. Admiral, I'm detecting Krell-Nax signatures. 3 heavy cruisers just emerged from hyperspace. The joy Park had felt a moment ago evaporated. The Krell-Nax, the aggressive species whose attack had started this entire crisis. The last thing they needed was another hostile force entering the situation. But the Krellnax ships didn't move to attack positions. Instead, they broadcast on standard diplomatic frequencies. The voice that came through was translated by the ship's computer. The flat, synthesized tone, conveying information, without emotion. Human vessel, indomitable. This is War Leader Zental of the Krellnax Confederacy. We have monitored your transmissions regarding navigational data through forbidden space. We propose immediate cessation of hostilities between Krellnax and human forces. Information you possess is more valuable than territory we currently dispute. We offer military assistance in exchange for full access to navigation mathematics. Park looked at Commander Chen in disbelief. Are the Krellnax actually asking to help us? Apparently, sir. Though I'd note they didn't apologize for trying to kill us 3 weeks ago. Park opened a response channel. War Leader Zental, your timing is suspect, and your past actions make trust difficult. But if you're serious about ending our conflict, we'll discuss terms after we survive the next hour. For now, if you actually want to help, the Black Fleet ships approaching from bearing 185 would make good targets. Acknowledged, Human Admiral. Krellnax forces will engage Ascendancy Black Fleet vessels. We will discuss navigation data when battle concludes. The tactical display was becoming crowded now. Black Fleet ships in one group. Admiral Cress's Tal's loyal Ascendancy forces, forming a defensive line. The vassal coalition spreading out in a wide formation around the indomitable, human reinforcements taking up positions on the flanks, and now Krellnax warships moving to intercept the Black Fleet advance. Lieutenant Kim studied the positions with a navigator's eye for patterns. Admiral, I have an idea. It's risky, but if we can execute it properly, we might be able to end this without massive casualties. I'm listening, Lieutenant. The Black Fleet is advancing in a standard heavy assault formation. It's textbook, ascendancy, military doctrine, designed to maximize firepower concentration, but look at the space around them. She highlighted regions on the tactical display. There are 3 nearby hyperspace instabilities that the ascendancy charts mark as navigation hazards. Small gravitational anomalies that would be dangerous to a ship in hyperspace, but don't affect normal space operations. And? Park prompted. And I can calculate jump coordinates that would bring our ships out of hyperspace right on top of the Black Fleet formation. We execute micro-jumps, just a few light seconds, using routes that Ascendancy navigators would never consider safe. We'd materialize inside their formation, completely disrupting their advantage in firepower concentration. Commander Chen frowned. Lieutenant, micro-jumps that precise are incredibly dangerous. If your calculations are off by even a small margin, we could materialize inside another ship or tear ourselves apart in the transition. Yes, ma'am. But I'm not using ascendancy mathematics. I'm using mine. And I'm very good at my job. Park looked at the tactical situation. The Black Fleet was minutes away from weapons range. Once the shooting started, hundreds of ships would be in combat, and casualties would be high regardless of who won. Kim's plan was dangerous, but it offered a chance to end the fight quickly. How many ships can execute this maneuver? He asked. Any ship with a navigator who can process the equations I'm about to send. All the human ships can do it. Maybe half the vassal coalition vessels have quantum computers. Powerful enough. It's risky asking them to make jumps like this without practice, but the alternative is a straight-up battle we might not win. Park made his decision. Send the calculations to all Allied ships. Make it clear that participation is voluntary. This is experimental navigation at its most dangerous. Then coordinate with Captain Rodriguez and the coalition commanders. If we're going to do this, we do it together. Kim's fingers flew across her console, transmitting data to every friendly ship in the system. Responses began coming back almost immediately. The human frigates confirmed they could execute the maneuver. Captain Rodriguez on the Dauntless acknowledged receipt and began preparations. The vassal ships were mixed, some accepting enthusiastically, others declining, but offering to maintain the defensive perimeter. Surprisingly, the Krellnax responded as well. Krellnax vessels will attempt this micro-jump maneuver. Our navigators have studied human mathematics. We will adapt or die trying. This is the Krellnax way. Well, Chen observed, if nothing else, this crisis is creating some very strange alliances. The next 15 minutes passed in tense preparation. Kim double-checked every calculation, running simulations and probability analyses. The mathematics were sound. She was certain of that. But combat was messy, and even perfect equations couldn't account for every variable. Fleet Commander Zaxatul watched his tactical display with satisfaction as the Black Fleet closed to weapons range. The traitor Krestal's ships were positioned to interfere, but they were too few to stop a concentrated assault. The vassal coalition vessels were scattered, easy prey for organized ascendancy warships, and the human ship at the center of it all was still damaged, still vulnerable. In 10 minutes, this would all be over. The human dreadnought would be destroyed. The vassal species would remember their proper place, and the ascendancy would be secure once more. Velnath and the other weak-minded reformers could rage all they wanted. History would remember Zaxatul as the commander who saved the empire. All ships, prepare to fire on my mark, he ordered. Target the Indomitable. Once it's destroyed, focus on the largest vassal vessels. He never finished the command. His tactical display suddenly lit up, with new contacts appearing inside his formation. Human ships, vassal vessels, even Krellnax cruisers materialized from hyperspace at point-blank range, their sudden arrival causing his carefully ordered formation to dissolve into chaos. How did they? Zaxatul started to demand. But the answer was obvious. They had jumped through routes his own navigators had insisted were too unstable for tactical use. The humans had done the impossible again. Aboard the Indomitable, Park watched with fierce satisfaction as the micro-jump maneuver executed flawlessly. 23 Allied ships had just materialized throughout the Black Fleet formation, too close for the Ascendancy ships to use their heavy weapons without risking hitting their own vessels. All ships, broadcasting on all frequencies, Park announced. This is Admiral Park Ji-hoon, to Ascendancy Black Fleet forces. You are surrounded. Your tactical advantage is eliminated. You can continue this fight and guarantee massive casualties on both sides, or you can stand down and allow the peaceful transition that High Coordinator Velnath is trying to achieve. The choice is yours, but you need to make it in the next 60 seconds. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, Zaxatul stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The perfect formation was ruined. Enemy ships surrounded his vessels, too close for standard engagement protocols. His weapons officer was requesting orders, but what orders could he give? Fire. And they'd be just as likely to destroy friendly ships as enemy ones. Try to reform the formation, and the enemy would have time to coordinate a devastating first strike. He had led the Black Fleet for 12 years. He had fought pirates, insurgents, and border incursions. He had never lost an engagement, but he had also never faced an enemy who could rewrite the rules of navigation on the fly, who could execute maneuvers that shouldn't be possible. The Ascendancy's power had always rested on controlling hyperspace routes. But these humans and their vassal allies had just proved that control was an illusion. If they could jump in and out at will, through routes that Ascendancy navigators couldn't match, then traditional fleet tactics were obsolete. Zaxatul looked at his crew, all of them waiting for orders that he suddenly realized would only get them killed for no purpose. Stand down weapons, he said quietly. Then louder, broadcasting to his entire fleet. All Black Fleet vessels, cease combat operations. We will discuss terms. It was the hardest order Zaxatul had ever given. But as he watched more ships arrive through impossible routes, as he saw the old empire crumbling in real time around him, he understood that he had just witnessed the death of everything he had fought to preserve. The age of Ascendancy dominance had ended not with a battle, but with a mathematical proof. And all he could do was watch as the galaxy learned to navigate without asking permission. 6 weeks after the confrontation at the Void Reach emergence point, Admiral Park stood on the observation deck of Unity Station and watched ships from 50 different species move through space in patterns that would have been impossible 2 months ago. The station itself was new, hastily constructed from modular components contributed by a dozen different governments. It hung in neutral space, belonging to no single power, serving as the headquarters for what everyone was calling the Navigation Council. Lieutenant Kim Seo-yeon stood beside him, a datapad in her hands showing the latest enrollment numbers for the Open Navigation Academy. 3,000 students in the first cohort, she reported. Representatives from every major species, and most of the minor ones. We had to set up overflow facilities on 4 different stations, just to accommodate everyone who wants to learn the new navigation mathematics. How many will actually have the aptitude for it? Park asked. About 40%, according to our initial assessments. But even those who can't master the complex calculations themselves will understand the principles well enough to know when someone is lying to them about what routes are possible. That might be the most important lesson of all. Park nodded. Watching a formation of ships execute a synchronized micro-jump, appearing and disappearing with the kind of precision that would have seemed like magic before Kim's breakthrough. Any word on your nomination for the Navigational Sciences Council? Kim made a face. I've been trying to decline. I'm a mathematician, not a politician. But High Coordinator Velnath keeps insisting that the council needs people who understand the actual science, not just the political implications. He's not wrong. I know. That's why I'm probably going to accept. She sighed. It's just not what I expected when I started working on those equations. I wanted to solve an interesting mathematical problem. Instead, I accidentally started a revolution. You freed half the galaxy from an invisible cage? Park corrected gently. People should get medals for that sort of thing. Which reminds me, congratulations on your promotion. Commander Kim has a nice ring to it. Kim touched the new rank insignia on her collar self-consciously. Thank you, sir. Though I'm not sure I've earned it. All I did was run some calculations and change the course of galactic history. Don't sell yourself short. They were interrupted by the arrival of High Coordinator Velnath, accompanied by Junior Counselor Treshkan, who now held the title of Reformation Minister. The Ascendancy had undergone massive changes in the past 6 weeks, with the old Inner Council dissolved, and a new governing structure being created based on far more transparency and accountability. Admiral Park, Commander Kim, Velnath greeted them formally. Thank you for meeting with us before the full council session begins. Of course, Park replied. Velnath gestured toward the viewport, where more ships continued their complex ballet through space. I wanted to personally thank you both for what you've done. The transition could have been violent. Many on my side expected civil war, but your willingness to share your knowledge freely, to help even those who recently considered themselves your enemies, created a foundation for cooperation instead of conflict. We did have some violent incidents, Treshkan added. 16 species filed territorial disputes in the first week alone. The Arxian Assembly tried to claim an entire sector that had been designated as forbidden space. And we're still dealing with rogue elements from the old regime who refuse to accept the new reality. Fleet Commander Zaxtel? Park asked. Awaiting trial, Velnath confirmed. Along with 7 Inner Council members who authorized the Black Fleet's actions. The legal process will be thorough. We want to demonstrate that we're serious about accountability, not just offering scapegoats. Kim looked up from her datapad. What about restitution for the species that were restricted to limited territories for centuries? That's actually what we wanted to discuss with you, Treshkan said. The Reformation Council is proposing a development fund to help formerly restricted species establish colonies in newly accessible regions. We're asking all the major powers to contribute, but we wanted to get your input on the fairness of the proposed allocations. She pulled up a holographic display showing the fund details. Park and Kim studied the numbers carefully. The Ascendancy itself was contributing the largest share. Nearly 30% of its annual budget redirected toward restitution efforts. Humanity had pledged significant resources as well, though far less than the ascendancy. Other established powers were contributing at various levels. It's a good start, Kim said. But money alone won't fix centuries of restricted development. These species need technical assistance, infrastructure support, and most importantly, they need to be treated as equals in the decision-making process. Agreed, Velnath said. That's why we're also proposing reforms to the Navigation Council's governing structure. Every species with hyperspace capability gets representation, with voting power based on population rather than historical influence. The old empire gave disproportionate power to the founding species. The new council will be genuinely democratic. Park raised an eyebrow. That's going to make governance incredibly complicated. You're talking about coordinating policies across hundreds of different cultures and legal systems. Yes. Treshkan agreed. It will be messy and frustrating and probably inefficient. But it will be fair. And after what the ascendancy did, fairness matters more than efficiency. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from Park's personal comm. He checked the message and smiled. Interesting. The Krelnaks want to schedule a formal meeting. They're proposing a permanent peace treaty and technology sharing agreement. They went from trying to conquer your territory to asking for cooperation in less than 2 months, Velnath observed. War leader Zental's pragmatism is remarkable. The Krelnaks respect strength and adaptability, Kim explained. We proved we could navigate better than anyone else. And we proved we'd share that knowledge, rather than hoarding it. In their cultural framework, that makes us worthy allies, rather than prey. Will humanity accept their proposal? Treshkan asked. Park considered the question carefully. I think so. The war between us started over territory that's suddenly much less valuable now. That expansion isn't limited by predetermined routes. And the Krelnaks' technology, particularly their shield generators, would be valuable for our own fleet development. If they're genuinely willing to move past our recent conflict, we'd be foolish not to take the opportunity. Velnath looked out at the ships moving through space, representing species that had been enemies just weeks ago. 6 weeks, he said quietly. 6 weeks since your ship came through the void reach and shattered everything we thought we knew. Some days it feels like a lifetime ago. Other days, it feels like it just happened. Do you regret it? Kim asked. The way everything changed so quickly? Regret? Velnath was silent for a moment. I regret that we maintained the lie for so long. I regret the species that suffered under artificial restrictions. I regret that it took an outside force to make us face our own corruption. But do I regret the outcome? No. We're building something better now. Messier. Yes. More chaotic, certainly. But better. More honest. A chime sounded, indicating that the full council session would begin in 10 minutes. Representatives from across the galaxy were gathering in the main chamber to discuss everything from trade route regulations to conflict resolution protocols. It would be tedious and argumentative and probably run several hours over schedule. But it would also be the first time in galactic history that such a diverse group of species came together as genuine equals to determine their collective future. We should go, Treshkan said. Ambassador Tinnerex is presenting the Veltorn Collective's proposal for standardized navigation certification. It's going to be controversial. As the group moved toward the council chamber, Park found himself reflecting on the past 6 weeks. The journey through the void reach had seemed like the dangerous part, the desperate gamble to escape an impossible situation. But the real challenge had come after, trying to help manage the chaos of a galactic power structure completely transforming itself. The Indomitable had been fully repaired and was currently docked at Unity Station, her crew working with engineers from a dozen different species to integrate some of the new technologies being shared as part of the Navigation Council's cooperation initiatives. Commander Chen was leading a joint training exercise with former Ascendancy and vassal species crews, teaching them the tactical applications of advanced navigation. Captain Rodriguez and her ships had become local celebrities, the human crews who had followed Park through impossible space and helped prevent what could have been a catastrophic battle. They were currently working with Krelnak's navigators, comparing notes on different approaches to hyperspace mathematics. The galaxy was learning to work together in ways that would have been unthinkable before Kim had sent her mathematical proof rippling through every network in known space. The council chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate representatives from nearly 200 species. Seating had been arranged in concentric circles rather than the old Ascendancy's hierarchical theater-style layout. Everyone could see everyone else. No one sat above or below anyone else. Park and Kim took their seats in the human delegation section, between the Krelnaks and the Arxian representatives. Velnath and Treshkan moved to the Ascendancy seats, now positioned at the same level as all the other delegations rather than elevated above them. The session began with Ambassador Tinarex presenting the navigation certification proposal. The debate was immediately intense, with some species arguing for strict standardization while others wanted to maintain their own independent approaches to navigation training. Park listened carefully, occasionally consulting with Kim when technical points needed clarification. Halfway through the session, there was a break, and Park stepped out to the observation deck again. He was surprised to find Fleet Commander Zaxtool there, under guard, but apparently allowed some freedom while awaiting trial. "Admiral Park," Zaxtool said formally. "You're not. Though, I'm surprised they're letting you attend council sessions. Special dispensation. High Coordinator Velnath believes that even those of us facing trial should understand what we're being tried for. I'm allow a retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses."